So let's give a warm round of applause to Mr. Rich Morrow.
Our companies are here. Our company's here at the Vault. It's myself, a couple other folks. We do basically cloud consulting. We help small to medium-sized businesses figure out what their cloud strategy is, help them architect, deploy, and maintain their apps in the cloud. If you feel an uncontrollable urge to tweet about this event, we have a hashtag for you. It's TFOCC for the future of cloud computing. It's an acronym that I'm not going to try to pronounce for obvious reasons. The presentation is also online. You can go to quickcloud.com/blog. It's the top presentation on there. You can follow along in the slides as well. So some folks I want to thank, Tom and Deb of DaVinci. They've created a very fertile ground for companies like mine to get going. Tom himself helped me out with the presentation a ton, being the big future brain. So huge thanks to you guys as well. Also, we've got some very big brains on our panel as well. Dave Jilk, Joe Wampler from Standing Cloud are joining us. John Sheehan from Twilio, another very interesting company. We'll have a lot more to talk about about those companies in future slides here. And most of all, thank you all for journeying out and making the trek in what I understand is about 5 or 6 degree weather out there with snow and everything. This evening is for you. If there's something that you're not understanding, something you came here to get, and I'm not giving it to you, please let me know. There is a ton of information in this presentation, and we're using a tool called Prezi.com, which you may or may not have seen before. There are some very cool little Easter eggs in here. If you want more information, you're an infomaniac, you can actually pull the presentation up, like I said, from our blogs and grab it there. Gosh, I can't get this thing to go away, and it's showing up there, isn't it? Well, I guess we'll deal with it. It'll go away in its own time. So first question out there, anybody go to BDNT frequently, Boulder, Denver, New Tech? So if you've ever heard a cloud company demo there, you'll know that Robert Reich always asks the question, how many people are out there using the cloud? So I'm going to ask the same question. How many folks are out there using the cloud in your personal or professional lives? Okay. Is anybody using any of these apps? And now raise your hand. Right, so the big lesson that always, the punchline in Robert's thing is pretty much everybody out there is using the cloud. But we don't really understand it, and that's a problem for obvious reasons, because if we don't understand what we're using, how can we talk about it and understand the benefits of it? And when I went out there to look for a definition of the cloud, nothing really worked. There were some that talked about one piece of it or another. The definition that I came up with that makes the most sense for me, knowing what I know about the cloud, is this, that the cloud is using virtualization and automation to provide users with self-service computing products that provide infinite scale at low costs. It's kind of a lengthy sentence, but you can break it down into really those two things. The cloud is virtualization and automation. And let's take a second to define those as well. Virtual just means not physical. So I can have a physical disk, and this is a disk. It's my 2 terabyte disk, and I had to pay for the hardware, and if it breaks, I have to maintain it, all that stuff. This is a virtual disk. I can take that disk, put it up on the net, and chop it up into bits, and I can lease you a piece, and I can lease you a piece, and I can lease everyone a piece. And then maintaining the hardware and buying the right disk and all that stuff falls on me. You just need the end product, which is storage. That's where you're looking. That's what you're looking for. Virtual software. So everybody has seen a copy of this. We've got Office Home and Student 2010, and before that there was a 28 and a 2006, and on and on and on. How many people have bought one of these before and have it laying around somewhere collecting dust? This is, again, it's mine. I can use it for about 2 years before it becomes completely ineffectual, and then I cannot even sell it on eBay. It doesn't really matter that it's my property. How many people have seen a copy of Google Apps? How many people own a copy of that? You got a copy? You got it, right, exactly. You lease it. So Google Apps is an example of a virtual piece of software. You don't own it, but again, do you really need to own it? You just need the end product. You need the Excel, you need the Word, you need the documents and the mail and so forth. Now virtualization, as anyone who knows anything about this will tell you, it's nothing new. We've been doing this for 40 plus years. But there are some interesting things that are new. Hardware virtualization, which we'll talk about a little bit, just started in the late 1990s. The ability to actually take a machine and divvy up its hardware pieces is pretty new. Broadband and mobile, I saw a lot of you, checking your mail on your Blackberries or your smartphones before this. You were probably accessing a cloud application that can work with a browser, whether that browser is on a smartphone or on your Mac. Hardware speeds and capacity have grown to the point where this stuff isn't slow anymore. It's really quick, and you can do some cool stuff. Amazon and EC2 have made it so we can lease servers. I don't have to go buy this desktop server and put the disks in it and set up OS and get my patches and all that. I don't worry about that anymore. And then the SaaS crowd, you've got Google Apps, taking business away from Microsoft. You've got Salesforce taking business away from everybody who used to do CRM, and it's such a tough thing. We've got to charge you, $10,000 a seat per year. And then I think the one thing we also can't ignore is the economy. As the economy gets worse, businesses need to do more with less, and the cloud lets them do that. On the automation side, automation will give you self-service, it will give you infinite scale, and it'll give you utility-based pricing and service. So when I need a server spun up, I don't have to call somebody up, I don't have to involve a human. I just go to my web portal and I spin my server up, I use it, I crunch my data, I can keep it up for 2 years as my web server, and when I'm done with it, I shut it down. And I'm only paying for that time that I'm actually using it myself. If I use Google Apps, I only pay for it for that year that I'm leasing it, that $50 a year. If I'm not happy with it, I can cut my license and I'm not tied in, I'm not locked in. And then the infinite scale, we'll talk about that in a couple slides as well. So to give you guys a good example of this, we're going to take a walk through .com era capacity planning. So was anybody around in the .com days in like Silicon Valley or anywhere else, where you'd walk into the receptionist's office and you'd see like a pallet of Sun servers, sitting there waiting for something, and nobody really knew what they were for? That's what this is about. So back then, we're pets.com. The CEO goes with his marketing team. He does all his numbers, gets his figures, and says, "Wow, we're going to need there's huge demand for a product. We're going to need to support 5 million users in 6 months." Runs off to the CTO's office and says, "Look, you got to help us." CTO gets his team, runs off and does his math, and he says, "Well, you're going to need a whole mess load of these things. They're called Sun servers. They're going to arrive in pallets. We're going to keep them in the receptionist desks area for about 8 or 9 years, and we're going to need a whole lot of VCs to sort of fund this and get these things bought for us." We're buying all this infrastructure. We're buying all these things for an audience that may or may not show up. And by the way, you're also going to need a couple dozen of these guys to keep those things running. They're called sysadmins. They love to play World of Warcraft. We're going to have to hire a couple managers to make sure they're not setting the servers up as Quake servers. And they're about 120 to 150K a year. So everybody does the math, and before you know it, you've become an infrastructure company rather than a web company. You're totally distracted. You've got 20 people, maintaining this infrastructure, and you've got 5 people out there trying to sell your product. There's a couple of reasons why pets.com fell apart, and to be quite frank, this is one of them. Now, businesses need a lot of stuff. You need pens, paper, you need the furniture you sit in, you need facilities, you need a building, you need a projector, you need all these things. We're not building those things, right? We don't know how to do it. We don't want to bother with it. Somebody else knows this stuff really well. Let's just sort of outsource it to them and get that end product. I want something to display something on the screen. Great, projector. That'll do the trick. But at the same time, even today, you still see businesses building non-core, and I use the word non-core because that's very important, computer, hardware, and software in-house. We need a Linux server. Oh, well, let's go build a Linux server, and I know the right distribution, and blah, blah, blah. Most of the times, you don't care. You just need something on top of that Linux server to actually do a task. So the cloud is about taking you out of the hardware and infrastructure business and getting you back into your business so you can focus on the things that you do different, the things that are going to get you a high return on your investment and make your VCs really happy. So instead of building this whole big honking infrastructure and this whole big honking mess load of Sun servers to serve this audience that may or may not show up, you can just build that little piece that you need right now. And then the really cool thing is you get the best of both worlds. If you need to scale this thing up, if you need to serve 50 million users, or you become the next Facebook or 900 employees or whatever, with a couple clicks or with something called auto-scaling, you can get the big piece of the pie, or you can get several servers. You can build up a whole business to serve your demand as that demand comes and not pre-build anything, which is a pretty cool little trick you can do. Does anybody have any questions about this part of it? Cool.
Rich?
Yes, sir.
Security, please.
Ooh, security is a big, big topic. What is your question exactly? Like,
how secure is it?
It depends on what you want to do. I would not put my users' data up in the cloud. I've got a whole bunch of people that gave me their addresses and their phone numbers and possibly their credit card. And in fact, there's even some laws preventing you right now from putting any credit card information in the cloud. That's actually something we're going to get to here in a couple slides. There's different ways around that, still using cloud technology and still getting bigger bang for your buck. But yeah, your question is huge. A lot of folks have that same question. What about security and what does that mean exactly? So yeah, here's sort of this cloud pyramid, and you can see that every layer sort of builds on the layer below it. So we've got infrastructure, the bare metal servers, bare raw computing power. We've got the platform above it. And well, let's just go through these. So we've got the infrastructure, the platform, and the application on the top. And when these are provided in the cloud, they're provided as a service. So the little AAS means as a service. Down at the bottom layer, we have infrastructure as a service. This is raw computing power. I need a big honking database, and it needs to have this much memory and this much RAM. That's what we're talking about here is a server you can load stuff on top of. Yeah. So some examples of that, we've got Amazon EC2 was the first one to get a product out there. Rackspace Cloud, GoGrid, probably doesn't mean a whole lot to us. Probably something that means even less is the platform as a service. And this is essentially for developers. So if you're not a developer, doesn't mean much. But if you are a developer and you want to not have to build wheels over and over and over again, you can get a platform as a service application, and you can use its pre-built wheels to build out more scalable services. And if you're interested in that, a company called Heroku was just bought by, I believe, Salesforce.com for like 212 or something like that million. It's kind of prime time. And then we've also got software as a service, which this is what most of you are familiar with. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where I log into my application, and this is what 95% of anyone who ever uses a cloud, all they're going to see is this piece. And then our apps here, obviously Google Apps, Salesforce, Prezi.com. And something really interesting about this, I can show you, I hope I can get back there. This is in a browser, folks. This is not an application that was existing on my desktop or had to pay or anything. This is just another tab in my browser. And actually a really cool kind of sidebar to that, we brought my Mac out here before and we were trying to hook it up and realized we didn't have one of the little dongles. Oh no, big panic, we'll put everything on a USB, we'll move it over. Don't even have to do that. You just need access to the URL to go there and get it. It's kind of a sort of cool little real-time benefit of it. And I have no idea where this software exists. I never paid a cent for it. I pulled it up in a browser. I played with it a little bit. I liked it. I kept building things out. That's what the cloud is kind of all about. Give you a sort of a freemium model. You can get started really cheap. This kind of gets into your question about security. There's different cloud types as well as that cloud pyramid I talked about. We've got the public cloud. These are cheap leased servers like Rackspace, Amazon. You can go there, pay a certain amount per hour, get raw computing power. They've got infinite scale, which you can, if you just need one server, that's great. You only pay for it. If you need 500, you can pay for that as well, and that's an option. And it's fairly easy to do. And then the utility-based pricing. Private cloud is where you take your own hardware. I buy my own server, and I dice that up into pieces, and I give a piece to my sales organization, I give a piece to my marketing organization. When they need websites or blogs or whatever, they've got their little slice that they can go in and do stuff. And this is typically used when you've got private data that you don't want out there and you want ownership and control of it. So, your user accounts, if you have HIPAA data, if you've got somebody's medical records, there are laws regulating that you do certain things and you can't just throw the data out there anywhere and you have to know where it is and all that stuff. There's a fixed cost with this, so you buy those servers, but every time you need a server, let's say you just buy one server, you can chop it up into 20 pieces, and when you need an additional piece, you can parse those out up until 20. And then after that, you're kind of locked. You've got to go buy another physical piece of hardware, but you do.
Why do you call that the cloud? Because I'm buying my own.
Sure, it's just one of the types of the clouds. And cloud computing, like I said, encompasses a lot of things, and virtualization is one of them. So when you hear folks talking about, is it in the public cloud or the private cloud, that's just kind of the distinction they made. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not.
But if I buy it, it doesn't mean I have to pay for the location.
You would still have to put it in a colo facility. You'd still have to go rent, space somewhere or have, a static DNS in your house. To serve anything off of it. The network, as the other gentleman said, of course you can't escape that. You got to hook your box up to it. And then we've got the hybrid, which is kind of a combination of the two. You can have the control where you need it. You can have the bursting into the cloud when you need it. If your 20 servers get exceeded and the next thing you want to do doesn't really need to exist in your own little private infrastructure that you control, you can then have some things built out there and have them crosstalk back and forth. Are there any questions about this part of the talk? Excellent. So that was, I should have said this before, but I broke the presentation down into 5 pieces. The first one we just went through defining the cloud, giving us some common vocabulary, getting some questions out of the way. The next 4 sections deal with like what's really going on in the cloud. We're going to look at what's possible now, and then we're going to look at 3 potential visions of the future and how things could shake out in periods of today to 5 years out, 5 years to 15 years out, and then 15 plus years out. So currently today in the overall evolution of the cloud, I think we are probably right about there. A few amoebas have crawled up off the beach, established beachheads. We've kind of figured this out, realized there's a little bit of different environment up here, maybe not as much competition, and a lot of companies are thriving because of this. So as we move forward here, apologies for that. I want to reference a book that I think really is powerful and really talks a lot about the cloud and how it compares to a previous epoch in history, which was the electric grid. Now, I didn't know this before reading the book, but 100 years ago, if you had a big facility and you were making widgets, you were making furniture, whatever, you needed electricity, you built your own power station. And you hired expensive resources to come in and maintain that station. And the parts were expensive. And the guy down the street is building the exact same thing. But I don't want to, tie into his infrastructure because he may not be doing it right, and this is a core piece of my business. Everybody's building these little fiefdoms of electric power. And then all of a sudden the electric grid came online, and folks are like, wow, you can build a blender. You can build a dishwasher. It inspired about 100 years of innovation, maybe like the world has really never seen before. Being able to plug into that as a service, the electric grid. So just as we go through this, if some of this stuff seems outlandish or seems out in left field, kind of think about what it looked like 15 years before electricity, or 5 years before electricity, and how things would have changed and how embedded electricity is in your life right now.
What was the book?
Oh, I'm sorry. Very good question. Nick Carr, The Big Switch. And again, this deck is available online, and I've got a whole reference section that you can go into. There's a couple books I reference as well. Thank you for the question. So there's different cool things that are possible now. One of them is hardware virtualization. So this is what I was talking about, buying your own server and chopping it up into pieces and making it more than one server. There's different technologies out there to do this, Citrix, KVM, Windows, and they all kind of operate in different levels and do different things at the moment. Well, not really. They kind of do the same thing, but there are slight differences. So this is running Mac inside your Windows, Windows inside your Mac. Take a single server, chop it up. And something else that we're going to trip on here that's new is virtual desktops. So I can buy one big honking server for my organization, and if I'm the CTO and you guys are all the ones I'm serving, I can each give you a dumb terminal that's just basically a glorified browser into that machine, and I don't have to pay for every time that there's a Windows 2014 or something, go back in and put in the disks and all the machines and worry about, oh, Joe needs more RAM or whatever. I've got ultimate power from my little console here and the big honking server that I've got to push more power out to individuals. There's already 2.5 million of these in existence, and we're just going to see that number continue to grow. In the infrastructure as a service business, we've got Amazon, the 800-pound gorilla. We've got Rackspace Cloud, which I personally love. They're great for small businesses. And actually, your local data center is starting to virtualize as well. I was just out in LA about 2 months ago, and the data center there was virtualizing. There's a data center here that called me. They're virtualizing their stuff. They're all moving to giving users a little web interface that can get in and call up their computing power. These are virtual servers on demand. And here's where I want to talk a little bit about that auto-scaling. So if you've got a little app that's out there on the web and you've just got one server. So the deal with auto-scaling that's really cool is if you've got a single server, and it's you get on Dig's first page, or you get a big email blast or something, you have software running on that server that basically says, I'm at 60% capacity. I know that I'm going to need to spin up another server. Makes a clone of itself, and it starts balancing load between those two. So now you've got 50-50, and you need another server. You spin up 3 or 4 or 100 or 500 of these things. Your load's there. You're on Dig's first page. Everybody's happy. Everybody's seeing your content. Nobody's getting 404s. And then when that load goes away, these things start saying, oh, wow, I'm only at 10% capacity. Take one out, take one out, take one out, back down until you only have a single server. Now, auto-scaling is a bit of a myth. If you get on Dig's first page, your site's going down. But you can bring it back up and you can serve users relatively quick. Nothing can deal with the spike, the immediate spike that you may get from like a Dig first page or something. But you can also do some really cool stuff. If your HR department tells you ahead of time, or I'm sorry, your marketing department tells you ahead of time, we're going to do a big email blast. You spin up 10 of those and have them waiting. Or some users do some really cool stuff and say, during the hours of 8 to 4 East Coast time, we're going to spin up extra capacity. And then during nighttime, we're going to spin back down and only pay when we're really getting hit. You can do hourly snapshots because that server is virtual. You can actually make copies of it. You can even do stuff like live migration, pick the thing up and move it to another server as it's serving traffic, which I still have absolutely no idea how it works, but I know it does. And then it makes stuff like high availability, which is HA, and high volume simple. So this is what, if any of you have a presence out there on the web, this is likely what it looks like. You're a small company, you want to get a server in a rack. You go buy your own server and you put everything on it. It's your database, it's your web server, it's everything that you can fit on a single box, because you're limited by the cost of building out the 5 or 6 servers that you would need to do it right. The cloud sort of takes that away and says, if you need 5 or 6 servers, we'll make it really cheap. You can set them each up as you need. You can have 2 load balancers, and I apologize if we're getting too geeky. Have 2 load balancers sitting there. Maybe that whole left column is on the East Coast. Maybe that whole right column of your architecture is on the West Coast. So if power goes out on the East, your website stays up. Those load balancers are out there just serving traffic. If one of them goes down, no problem, still serving traffic to 1 or more back-end web servers, which are then talking to 1 or more back-end databases. You can optimize each server for its task, give the database more memory, give the front ends, just have them super bare bones with lockdown security on there. The cost of doing this non-cloud would be about $25K in acquisition to go out and buy decent-sized servers to do all this. Then you've got to pay your ISP, your colo facility, whatever they're going to charge you, and they can pretty much charge you whatever you want once you're in there. And then you've got to maintain them and do all that stuff. That's sort of, in a lot of ways, taken care of for you in the cloud. Now, at the moment, you do have to sort of be a sysadmin for this stuff. But that stuff is absolutely changing. Thanks to companies like Standing Cloud, who's joining us tonight, as well as another company called Turnkey Linux, you can now get these virtual appliances. I don't care if I'm running Ubuntu or CentOS. I don't even know what that means. I want Drupal, and I want Drupal version 5.5, or I want Bugzilla, and I want Bugzilla version 6.2. Whatever it is, you can just go grab a virtual appliance from them, load it into the cloud, and then it's there running for you. You didn't have to set up a Linux server. You didn't have to set up the application itself and worry about, am I setting it up the right way or not? Very, very cool stuff. So a really important thing I want to drive home here is that everyone right now in this room has access to supercomputing power. And this is a way some folks are using it. Pete Warden made, I think, national news, and he was actually down at BDNT talking about this about 6 months ago. Perfectly legally, but still makes some people cringe. He pulled down 215 million Facebook profiles. And then he loaded it into the cloud, right? He set up what's called a cluster, a Hadoop cluster of machines to analyze this data. And he was looking for trends. What do users in the South like versus the North? What are we, what is really going on in Facebook, and what does that data look like? He only spent about 11 hours to do the data crunching, and it only cost him $110. Pretty amazing stuff to crunch, to get your Facebook lawyers to call you up and say, cease and desist, or we'll sue you into hell and back. $110, that's what it costs these days. So, this, and he found out some really cool stuff, like folks he labeled it Dixie, God was a #1 like of folks down there. He found out folks in what he called the nomadic West, Colorado, Utah. We travel a lot, and we have friends all over the place. It's not the folks you'd think in New York and LA. They basically just have friends with each other. The folks in the West have friends in Turkey and Istanbul and all over the place. Kind of interesting stuff. So then currently on the software as a service side, we looked at all these things. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is what folks are familiar with. As we mentioned before, storage is essentially free. If you've got storage out there, you're paying nothing or next to nothing for it. Your mobile and your cross-platform is huge. You've got to have an app that you can access via mobile, at least one platform. And then security and functionality updates happened automatically. So, the next time I log into Facebook after they did profile change, I just see that. I don't have to load disks on my machine and worry about, did I set this thing up the right way? Do I know what I'm doing here? I put the disk in the back of the machine. I don't know what the hell's going on. And that's everybody playing in there. And then Google Apps is kind of straddling it. They've got stuff which I would consider infrastructure. They've definitely got a platform as a service. There's a couple other companies that are starting to blur the line. Standing Cloud absolutely being one of those companies. Are they a software as a service? Are they an infrastructure as a service? It's starting to blur a little bit about that. And then there's two really cool bolder companies I like to also call out. Simplified, you'll see companies starting to aggregate their user credentials, providing authentication and authorization so that when somebody joins my enterprise, I push a button and it creates the 20 accounts that they need out there on the cloud. And then when they leave my organization, I push another button and it pulls those 20 accounts back in. And then Twilio, who also has an infinitely scalable telephony over HTTP product. So I can make IVR systems and all kinds of cool stuff. So the common themes we see here: self-service, I've got my own web portal, fast iterations, users decide what's most valuable. If you're a business trying to leverage this, or you're a technologist interested in this area, for the technologists, I would say look at open source technologies and mindsets, get with that. Definitely client-side technologies, jQuery, stuff like this that you write once, you can run it anywhere, NoSQL databases, data mining. If you're a business, you need to start thinking about how you can give your product away. How can we release this and find another way to pay for it and generate our revenue rather than charging our users. And then I think another big thing in here is learning how to launch in beta. Don't make it perfect before you get it out there. Get it out there, let your users decide if it's something worth spending time on. Winning skills to hire for, definitely again open source technologies. Most importantly, I'd say here, only hire your core competence. Outsource everything else. Okay, there's that slide that I shifted and forgot where it was. So now we're getting into the first stage of the future of cloud computing, 1 to 5 years, the age of the chimp. And something, kind of a caveat I want to throw out there, a lot of the predictions about the future and computing and so forth depends on Moore's law holding true, which it has for the last 30 years, 30, 40, which basically says that computing power will double every year to 2 years. And it, like I said, it pretty much has. So one of the things that's coming online really fast is the government is actually leading the charge into cloud computing. They're trying to, take this siloed environment that they have and make it so that the Department of Defense doesn't have to create their own infrastructure. Who else do we have in here? The NSA doesn't have to create their own thing and deal with their own vendors and do all this stuff over and over and over. They're going to make it so that you can just call those resources up. There will be a government cloud that you can pull resources from if you need to do massive Facebook data crunching to see if people on Facebook are terrorists. Pull those profiles in. Actually, I know somebody that can help them with that. Pull those profiles in, do everything you need to do, spin that resource up, spin it down, move on. Healthcare is something that's also going to be tremendously affected, I think, by the cloud. I think in the next 5 years, we're going to have implanted devices that can monitor your blood for diseases, and then maybe once a week, load it up into the cloud, and the cloud will crunch it and compare it to your age range and your sex and all that, and maybe send you a text or send your doctor a text. Hey, it looks like your cholesterol is higher. They were seeing these cells that look like cancer or something. There's 2 devices on here. The one on the upper left that's sort of black, that has a little dongle coming down on it. This is something that's going to come available in about 2 to 3 months. It's a little iPhone plug-in that diabetics can use to test their blood. And you're going to put it in there and it's going to tell you what your glucose level is. There's only a certain amount of time before it sort of marries with the device below it, which is an embedded RFID chip. And they're going to be able to put this thing into you and do that, which is, I just had a friend actually pretty timely call me earlier today and tell me that his girlfriend's mother just found out she had cancer. How many times have we heard that? Oh, if we just caught it soon enough, if we just, if they just had 2 or 3 more months, I think that's coming. And then, of course, with that, I think your online identity management is going to become really key. Somebody is going to have to step up to the plate and provide us as individuals places, a lockbox to sort of keep our medical records and keep our personal financial data. You know, I've got an account at Wells Fargo, I've got an account at Bank of America, I've got to create, you know, those 2 separate accounts. I've got a Facebook account, I've got all these different things. I need a lockbox, I need some way. And there are lockboxes out there that do that, but none of them really identify me as Rich Morrow. I could say I'm Rich Morrow, I could create a profile, I can do all kinds of nasty stuff as Rich Morrow, but I actually may be a dog on a computer. And then on the consumer and individual level, you're going to see those expectations of free and low cost just permeate. Skype is free, Google Apps is free, list on and on and on. It's free, free, free. Why am I going to pay you for your product? Telepresence, I think, is going to become more and more common. I've worked at a facility that had these before. They're really big, expensive, nasty, financial burdens on the company, but they're very useful, and they're going to get cheaper and cheaper. And with the virtual desktops and things like this, you can already kind of do that with Skype and some other technologies. And then you're going to see thin clients and virtual desktops become the norm. You're going to walk into a company and go, oh, okay, I get it. That's my little dumb browser, and I don't have to worry about my own computer. This is, I think, the biggest part of this is robotics and AI. The next 1 to 5 years. The first wave of robotics was pretty dumb. It was welders that came in and took over jobs in Detroit and pissed everybody off about, 20, 25 years ago. And it's become kind of a convenience now. You go, I go to the ATM, I can get there, it's self-service, I can do whatever I want. I can go to the grocery store. There's now 4 checkout lines for every 12 or so. A couple years, it's going to be half and half. About 5 years, it's going to be 90%. And if you really want to talk to a person, they're over there, in aisle 26. And then even personal devices like taking care of our cleaning needs at home. Roombas. Anybody own one of those? The little disc vacuum cleaners? Pretty awesome. So this is what the next wave is going to look like. This is the kind of computing power that we're moving towards. I think sometime in the next 5 years or so, 1 of 2 professions is likely to be outsourced to a computer, and that's going to make big, big news. And the 2 likely candidates are airline pilots and surgeons, believe it or not. They've already got robots. The really telling thing, if you can see very good, that bottom picture, look where the surgeons are in comparison to the robot. They're kind of on the periphery. The robot's right there in the middle. It's got the fine-grained accuracy to go in and do the cuts. Now, at this moment, that robot is driven by the surgeon. That's the surgeon's hand just operating a very precise device. And if the surgeon, flips out and, has an epileptic attack or something, the device doesn't move over and slice a yard out of the patient. But as computing power gets bigger and bigger, and we're crunching more data, and the computer's able to, consult, like, wow, this guy that I'm cutting into just had this weird thing happen. Let me go consult the database. Oh, this happened 5 years ago over here, and this is how we fixed it, or this is how we didn't fix it and how we could fix it this time. That surgeon's brain is not going to work that fast. They're not going to be able to go in and know all that data and have access to all that data. And this is a slide I'm going to kind of skip through. Network and broadband, we're kind of hitting the limits. And you're welcome to again, look at these slides. There's only about 3% of the IP addresses that we currently use are available, and those are going to exhaust in the next year or 2. So there's various infrastructure, network, broadband improvements that we're going to have to make, and we're definitely going to need net neutrality for the little guys to compete, with bigger players who are already entrenched. Are there any questions about that age or any of that stuff? So now I think we're entering sort of the Middle Ages, about 5 to 15 years from now, when we start actually doing some relatively complicated stuff. We're going to start seeing cloud technologies become ubiquitous. If you're not deploying into the cloud, you're going to need a darn good reason. There are definitely a few of them, but you're going to see more and more operations going over there. You're going to see all of your personal data stored in the cloud. It may not exist on your desktop anymore, and you may not want it to exist on your desktop anymore. I was just in Borders when I was putting this talk together and doing a search on their card catalog, and it kind of looked like this. Borders themselves is, from what I understand, really having a cache problem right now. So they're looking at different ways to monetize. And this is one of the things they're doing. It's horrible resolution, you can't see it. But these little brown boxes, it says digital. I can download a digital copy of the ebook. There's no cost to publish it. There's no cost to print it. If I am an author and I want to put my book out there, I can do it. And if folks like it, they download it. And if they don't, well, I go back to flipping burgers or whatever I was doing before. We're going to start seeing the bookstores becoming virtual, which kind of saddens me because I love going to bookstores. Healthcare is going to continue to be affected by this. We're going to start getting into personalized medicine. After we've had these devices in our body and after we've started crunching numbers about what's going on, for individuals like me, my blood type, or maybe my diet, I'm eating some certain thing, we're going to start seeing trends. The computers are going to start picking up, wow, this, maybe I don't need a pill that's 500 milligrams. Maybe my dosage for my body is 262 milligrams, but I have no options like that now. I can get, a 500 milligram or a 1,000 milligram dose. And we're going to start seeing where you can go in and get your doctor to give you personalized attention and care. We're going to start crunching data to the point, a lot of big diseases I feel are data issues. Do you have all the right data? Did you connect all the right pieces? Did you look at everything you could have? We might start seeing cures for major diseases, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or something like that. At least we'll start making better inroads when we've been able to crunch this data better. Another big thing, I think China and India are, they're the story of the next century, and the cloud is all about what they need to do. They need massive scale, they need it super cheap, and they need it on demand. That's exactly what's going on. So America might pass the technology baton as far as the cloud from ourselves, who already have this sort of entrenched mindset, and I've already got 6 servers and they work good, I'm not going to bother about repeating that. Somebody building a business in China or even in the US right now has this other option, and you're going to see a lot more businesses being built there. And then this, I think, is the most important set of slides for this area. I think we're really looking at the age of the individual. When I can, Bill Gates from Microsoft said that in just a couple years, you'll be able to get a world-class education by downloading and looking at and viewing lectures from the top minds on any subject that you want. There's already universities like the University of the People or Khan Academy that you can go and get a bachelor's or I don't think they do bachelor's yet. I think it's a 2-year degree, but completely free. And the course material's free, there's volunteers, it's open source sort of mindset around this. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to rework the education system. Now this is what education was probably too far back, but about 100,000. Yes, sir. The question is, do you really want to be educated by a bunch of people who could be spreading lies and falsities out there in the internet? Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that now. Not Wikipedia, The Onion has gotten published, in major newspapers for articles that they didn't vet. I think journalists are going to have to, pull their head back out of, I need to just create a story and I'm just going to go pull things out and do what I need to do, and the educational institutions as well. That's definitely, I mean, that's a big thing that happens with Snopes and these other websites is like, wow, was there really a 3-headed deer that just attacked the president? Going back, no, it was bullshit. Somebody made a story up. Somebody needs to be.
I just got pulled from Virginia because they had all these inaccuracies, and the woman who wrote the book pulled the information from the internet. So they had to pull all the 4th grade history books because they were wrong.
That's classic. So yeah, he was just saying that they had to pull these textbooks from from Virginia, because this woman who wrote the book pulled all of her information off the internet, probably the Onion site.
Spell check.
Yeah, I think that was a whole level of failures. There were probably 4 or 5 people that were asleep at the wheel there to let something like that slide through. But yeah, I mean, if we're just pulling information off the internet, you better make sure it's good information. You better make sure that you've checked it out and you've looked at it. And if you're putting an online course together, you better make sure that it's factual. Very good point. And then this is what education looked like 100 years ago, and then this is what education looked like today. And if you zoom in, you see it's not really working too well. This is what education looks like going forward. If kids are information sponges. My daughter's 5 years old, my oldest one, and she's asking me questions all the time about stuff I know nothing about. She gets really into ostriches or Batman. She's really into Batman now. I didn't read Batman as a kid. I know nothing about it. But I can go get all the backstory, and I can find, I can drill down as deep as she wants to go. She knows how to drive YouTube now and look at videos, and definitely there's, you need the parental controls on for certain stuff. But kids are able to go out and dig down as deep as they want to go in any given topic and find out, wow, I'm really, I've got I think there's a few of us, there's a lucky few of us that found what we really love doing. We just kind of tripped across it, and we enjoy it. But at the same time, if I'd been exposed, maybe I was a gifted concert pianist. I never got a chance to go and look because maybe I asked my dad, hey, what is concert piano about, and he didn't know, and there was no YouTube then, so it kind of moves on. So I think we're going to start getting folks out of, Mozarts are no longer going to be working in sweatshops. If you've got a really heavy-duty talent in a certain area and you've got internet access and you've got access to these education facilities, I'm going to learn about it. And if I'm a world-class violinist, like maybe the girl over there, second from the left in the front row, I am going to be able to become a concert violinist a lot easier than I could now. I'm going to have to skip through a couple of these slides. I think we're coming up on the end of the time. But I'd love to talk more about computers that know you and computers starting to realize what it is you're trying to do and kind of anticipate what it is that you want to do. So now we're getting into the last phase, which is the age of man, or maybe we should call it really the age of the robot, because this is when robots really take over. It's not just going to be a few lines in the checkout stand. You're going to have smart robots being able to do a variety of jobs that maybe you don't need people for anymore. And this whole, up until now, that your ability to feed yourself depended on your work and what you could do, I think things are going to start to change a little bit. So 15 plus years from now, complex data problems are going to become very simple. Crunching these big data sets, you're going to have data on folks. You already saw Pete Warden going in and crunching massive amounts of data and pulling out all these patterns. We're going to start unlocking a lot of mysteries that would have eluded us, I think, otherwise. And one of those mysteries is our language. I'm speaking English right now, and that's great, and you guys all understand English, but if I was here speaking English in China, you'd probably all be asleep by now. Our language is a complex data problem that's really limiting our ability to communicate and collaborate with other folks around the globe. And natural language processing is going to evolve to the ability that I could maybe take a little device with me into a meeting in Japan or China and have it pick up all the nuances, have it pick up all the things that this person's telling me that my $100 an hour before translator is, they're just trying to rush through and get it, or maybe they don't even understand the nuances themselves. And I hope this turns out, because this is a really cool little app called Word Lens. This is sort of a vision, I think, of where things are going. Glacially slow. Okay, maybe we won't show everything here, but remember that network bandwidth issue I was talking about before? So there on the top, you see the woman showing up signs in Spanish, and on the bottom, in real time, he's holding his iPhone up, and it's translating that text into his native language. This is a little app you can download right now. It's called Word Lens, and folks are using this all over the globe. It's incredibly useful. It's like the ultimate augmented reality app. You go to Ecuador, and boom, oh wow, there's the market. Oh, there's the doctor. You get this picture of the world transported to you, the individual, and I don't have to worry about, you should still, pick up the culture and other stuff, but maybe the basic ability to get around and help myself in a foreign country is already heavily influenced by that. This is something else that's really important. Your computer is going to get as smart as you are, which in my case maybe isn't a step forward, but hopefully for all of you it is. 10 quadrillion instructions per second is about what the human brain does. And to get a concept of quadrillion, if you took pennies and you stacked them up into a cube, it would be about a half a mile wide of solid pennies is a quadrillion pennies. And our brain processes 10 quadrillion instructions per second. So there's a lot of stuff going on in our heads that we're still trying to figure out. Computers are going to get there. It's only a matter of time before computers reach the raw processing power of the human brain. And that matter of time is very, very soon. Like I said, 10 to 20 years are going to get us there. And that's when things really start getting interesting. Because we may be the first generation of humans on the planet who tries to answer the question, what do I have to do when I don't have to do anything anymore? Who here loves to clean their toilet? Who here loves to do calculus? Maybe some of us do. But we're not going to be forced to do these things anymore. Just like the folks who used to be at the tellers and are now ATM machines, they don't have to do that anymore. And whether you wanted to or not may become irrelevant. But I think we really need to start planning for a world in which I may not have to do what I'm doing right now. And I may have to start mentally preparing myself for that. But the cool side of that is, as we talked about utopian, dystopian, maybe we can start focusing on what we really do enjoy. And when you're really passionate about something and you're really into it, don't you put a whole lot more energy and a whole lot of yourself, more of yourself into it than just showing up for a 9 to 5 and getting your paycheck at the end of the month? this could become a really exciting time in the history of humans to have a huge advancement on the human side, because we're all doing something that we love, because we're all finding the talents that we're gifted with, and we're exposing those things. So humans as gears, I think, are going to become a thing of the past. You're already seeing, caretaker robots, these different things that, Japan is sort of playing around with. They're all kind of trinkets, and, we all smirk at them, but they are going to happen, I think, in our lifetime, maybe in the next 10 to 20 years. We're going to start seeing inroads of this. Human labor, I think, is going to start becoming more of the type of, again, bringing your skills to the table rather than just hiring out at a company and them trying to find a way to keep you busy. Tom Frey has written extensively about this topic of business colonies, individuals coalescing around a single movie. And we get Joe the painter, we get Sally the costume designer. Bring them all in, they do what they need to do, movie's over in a year and a half, and they all go back out in the job pool and they coalesce around another work project. And then this is where the virtual and the physical starts to blur. You've already got kids in South Korea that spend 18 hours a day inside of World of Warcraft. And maybe they spend 3 hours a day working at 7-Eleven in order to pay the bills so that their internet stays on. You're already seeing people opt out of the virtual, opt out of the physical, and go into the virtual. Virtual worlds are going to become a lot more richer. You're going to be able to have richer interactions. Maybe I can talk to somebody in China in the virtual world, and I can't do that because I got to jump on a plane and get over there, but we could have a virtual meeting together. You're going to see folks starting to do all kinds of cool stuff. We're going to have the ability to upload your brain as it is now into the cloud. We're going to be able to do this faster than we can cure your body and cure your cancer or whatever. We might make a choice to sort of freeze grandpa as he was and keep his memories around so we can consult him, ask him questions. And this raises a whole bunch of interesting questions about what it means to be human, and do we have a right to flip that switch off, after grandpa's been put into the computer. Individuals are going to be able to start renting factories and fabrication facilities. Right now I can get immense computing power, and I can actually do a little bit of what's called 3D printing right now. So I could print out a little gear, and it would be a 3D physical object. There's actually a company called CloudFab who specializes in this. You can go there, you can upload your CAD designs, they'll print out whatever it is that you need and ship it to you, an actual physical thing. So I created something in the virtual world, they send it back to me in physical. What would happen if I am a gifted car designer and I have access to a factory and I can make this great car that everybody loves and wants to drive, and I can run a one-off. I can print, I print it out and it shows up at the Detroit Auto Show or Tokyo Auto Show, wherever, and folks go crazy over it. I can start to either make a lot of money, or what I think is really going to happen, get a lot of reputation. Now, right now, I think money is just kind of a crude tool that we all use to sort of get what it is that we really want, which is recognition. When I've done a good job, I want folks around me to say, "Wow, that was great." Honoring a little bit what I put together. The way that they do that now is, "That was great. Here's your bonus check. It's 30 grand." Or that wasn't great, you're not going to get any bonus. And one person makes that decision. It's your boss. And your boss may not be the right person to make that decision. He could be just as confused as you are, and probably is. When you put it out into the world, and the whole world gets to decide if this is exciting or not, and they get to buy it themselves, you got a whole different perspective on what it is that you can and want to do. I think our virtual and our physical, like I said, you're going to be able to choose one over the other. And to sort of ride this out, I want to give you a quote that I hope will spark some thought and some questions. Marshall Brain, who's the founder of a company called HowStuffWorks.com. It's kind of like, he started this before Wikipedia, and it was more personalized. He put in, how does internet work? How does email work? And he put in these great descriptions about how all these things work, and it was really personalized content. Not personalized, but humans generating the content, and he had his own staff and contributors. Very smart guy. He's written a whole bunch of series of online books that you can actually go and read, and I'd suggest you do if you're interested in this topic. This quote is from a book called Robots in 2015, and he's proposing, I think, the most salient question he has in any of his books. With robots doing most of the work, can we actually create a society that takes advantage of the leisure that humans can provide? Or are we going to end up pissed off and and waiting for a check in the welfare line because a robot took our job? So with that, are there any questions before we get into our panel discussion?
Let's just take a break here,
Okie doke.
and let's give Rich a big round of applause.
Thanks all.